Hello everyone, good afternoon. I am here to present my capstone project entitled Geospatial Analysis of Typhoon Evacuation Center Locations in Metro Manila. Located along the typhoon belt in the Pacific, the Philippines is visited by an average of 20 typhoons every year. But despite the yearly unpleasant visits of these typhoons, LGUs still do not have enough evacuation centers, and most of the evacuation centers do not adhere to the minimum design standard. But what do we mean by the evacuation center's minimum design standard? Here are the site selection criteria for evacuation centers from UNICEF. It mentions the ideal size of the area, connection to basic utilities such as water and electricity, and mapping, but none about the actual structural design. Now let's take a deeper look at the evacuation centers in Metro Manila. I have grouped the evacuation centers into these categories. As you can see, most of them are schools. Second are covered basketball courts. And we have unknown. These are places tagged as evacuation centers, but the addresses are incomplete. They only tell you the subdivision name or the barangay name, but the exact location is unknown. There are also evacuation centers. So what do we get from this chart? Most of our evacuation centers are facilities that are being used day to day as schools, basketball courts, and so on. And then when the typhoon comes, these are converted to evacuation centers. Only three of them have the name evacuation centers on them. Now let's take a look at this image where the evacuation centers are mapped. UNICEF included that evacuation centers should have coordinates. Metro Manila has 631 evacuation centers, but only 390 of them can be found in Google Maps. This is because some of the addresses are incomplete. You may have noticed that only few are listed here in Manila and also in Quezon City. The objective of this project is to group the barangays based on their population density, flood hazard level, and number of evacuation centers to get which barangays are in need of evacuation centers. This is also to encourage the barangays to build an evacuation center, convert facilities to an evacuation center if they have low budget, or upgrading facilities for sustainability. This is the overview of the steps to achieve our objective. Number one is collection of data. Next is process the shape files or the geospatial data of Metro Manila so we can connect it to our regular data. Then we fit the combined dataset to our machine learning models. From there, we can form conclusions and recommendations. The first in our process is collecting the data. We have four main datasets. First one is the Metro Manila polygons, which contains the administrative boundaries of the barangay. Next is the list of evacuation centers, which are categorized and mapped earlier. Next is the 2015 population per barangay. And lastly, the flood hazard map from LIPAD. Some key numbers here. There are 1,706 barangays and there are 631 evacuation centers in the metro, meaning there are 3 barangays sharing 1 evacuation center. Let's go to the flood map of LIPAD. It is categorized to 3, low, medium, and high according to height. To process this flood map and the Metro Manila polygons, I use the software QGIS for this activity. First is we get the barangay and the flood hazard map polygons. Second is we match the barangay polygons and the flood maps. Next is we use the method intersect from GeoPandas to check if the maps intersect with one another. And lastly, we merge the result to the PSA dataset. After merging, we can get the flood risk of the barangay if it is high, low, or medium, and the population density. Next step in our methodology is modeling. These are the unsupervised machine learning models tested for this project. This is to group the barangays as per the objective of this project. The most even grouping is from K-means model. So also the silhouette score from the K-means model is higher compared to the other models. So K-means will be used in this project. Here are the results. The slide is crowded, but let me explain. So this is the count of the barangays, first row. The second row is the flood hazard map. Third is the evacuation center. And fourth, lastly, is the average population density. For here, our cluster 1, there is 100% low and medium risk of flood and very low percentage of evacuation centers. For cluster 2, it has descending percentage from low, medium, and high, has 200% evacuation center, and has the lowest population density. For cluster 3, it has the higher percentage of flood risk compared to group 2 here, but has very low number of evacuation center and higher population density than group 2. Then, for the last cluster, it only has medium risk. Also, for cluster 4, only has medium risk, also low percentage of evacuation center, but has the highest population density among the rest. If we group them by color, this is red, this is orange, yellow, and green. So based on those groupings, we can highlight the cities for prioritization. On the left are the cities of Metro Manila and the barangay grouping color mentioned earlier. So the top cities to be prioritized are Las Piñas, Quezon City, and Marikina. For Las Piñas, it is recommended that they check the 70 evacuation centers in the city if they are flood-proof. It is also recommended that they build sustainable evacuation centers with connection to water and electricity because 16 of them are basketball courts. And if they have additional budget, they can also build flood tunnels and spillways. For Quezon City, it is recommended that they build evacuation centers or have them listed to the master list of evacuation centers. And lastly, for Marikina, it is recommended that they check if the 22 evacuation centers in the city are flood-proof because most of them are near Marikina River. So these are the recommendations per group. For the priority group or the red group, they should plan to build evacuation centers or convert facilities into one. They should also consider the flood hazard risk of their barangays. The pangalawa or the second group has gymnasiums and schools as evacuation centers, but should build for those barangays without one. And also consider the flood hazard risk, same with the priority group mentioned. For the pagitan or the middle group, should build more sustainable evacuation centers because most of them are basketball courts. Lastly, for the prepared group, they should still check their evacuation center facility types as most of them are parking lots and open spaces. Lastly, I will leave you with this quote. So, to all aspiring data scientists like me, let us encourage our government to improve. So, let us make Philippines a better country to live in. Thank you.